Hello, my name's Jethro Bovingdon. Welcome to the Targa Club. I'm here at Liddon Hill at their event called Fast Friends, and they are not kidding. We have Group B monsters, Group A cars, WRC cars, and much more besides. I'm not normally into car clubs, but this is one that I very much want to join.
Hello everybody, today on A Life in Cars, Andy Manning-Smith, founder of Targa Club. If you've not heard of it, that's because it's new. Targa is a hybrid of private members club, track day and car show, all rolled into one. I recently attended one of their events and was impressed at what they'd achieved in such a short space of time. Andy has very kindly given me access to the club and invited me to come and create content for the channel. When it came to promoting his next event, I set him a challenge. Don't just tell us what you're selling, tell us who you are. For someone who's had over 100 cars, I figured he'd have some good stories to share, and I was not disappointed. So, relax and enjoy a tale of exploding Range Rovers, bulletproof Jaguars, and if you like the sound of Targa Club, which we will promote at the end, you can ask Andy why he met Sterling Moss wearing his wife's clothes. A big thanks to Mather Collectible Cars for providing the venue for today's film. It's a long one, but hopefully enjoyable. I'll see you on the other side.
Hi, I'm Andy Manning-Smith and I'm the founder of Targa Club, which is a private members car club. My car history started from a very, very young age. I think it was the age of 4, I was given a book of the Observer Book of Cars from 1968, and I read it front to back over and over and over and over again. Then I got into Matchbox cars, which you often do, and my thing was Smokey the Bandit. I loved Smokey the Bandit, it was amazing. I was just totally obsessed by it. 4 years old, and I was brought in by my mother, who was really concerned. She'd found 200 Matchbox cars that were new in my house. And she wanted to know why on earth I had it. And it turned out that at the time I'd been having a negotiation with my best friend. He owned 200 cars, I owned Smokey the Bandit. I thought the Smokey the Bandit was worth a lot more than 200 cars. We had a long discussion. I walked out with 200 cars. His mother wasn't best pleased. We had a discussion with my mother. We took them back. I ended up with Smokey the Bandit, which I've still got today. I grew up in London, in South London, until I was about 13 when we moved away. Before that, my parents' car history was just diabolically awful. So the greatest car that my father had owned, in his opinion, was a Ford Anglia, which he bought new, which was then quickly followed up when I was born with a series of Morris Marinas, which were bought at auction. So we had a white one, which was a TC, so a big twin-cam 1.8 engine. That went wrong horribly. That was followed by one maroon, which had a dent in the rear corner. At the time, I would look at the teachers' cars and think they're amazing. Like a Metro would look amazing to me. You know, the teacher had a brand new Metro. I thought that was absolutely amazing. That was how diabolical it was. About 1980, that would have been. So Metro had just come out. That's why it was a quite exciting car to see. There weren't very many new cars in our area. Although it was a suburb of London, it wasn't somewhere you saw lots and lots of new cars. Then my parents moved on and my father's jobs improved, and as his jobs improved, his cars improved. And so I remember being enormously excited when he came home from work one day in a red Renault Fuego GTS, which had the turbo wheels in it. I mean, I had no idea what it was. It just looked like a spaceship to me. It was wonderful. Loved it. And then his jobs improved again and changed car again. And I remember having a discussion with him. We're looking at, it was the era of the early Lancia Deltas, and they started doing the 4x4s, and those just looked amazing. You know, in the rallies, we'd looked at those and thought they were incredible. At that stage, my father went out, and we went to the Lancia dealership, and we went to go and see, I remember it was a white Martini liveried Delta HF Turbo. It just looked amazing. And we thought, that's the car for us. We'll have that perfect car for family. And the bank said no. It was just a little bit above what they were willing to pay. So we started looking again at see what else could we have, what else was around that might be available. And there was a load of adverts at the time. Mitsubishi Colt Gallant Turbo, which was described as the fastest 2-litre 5-seater. It was a ridiculous looking thing, very, very squared, boxy. It had enormous arches on it. It had a full body kit on it. And we thought, you know, that's the car. And we went to the dealership to go and see it, and they had one left in stock. It had been sat there for a year and a half, so they were willing to discount it, which is why we were able to get it. The colour was metallic brown with a blue velour interior. I have never seen anything quite like it. And I fell in love that day. And from then onwards, I was a total petrolhead. I loved that car. That was followed by another Lancia Delta, I think, and then another Mitsubishi Galant Turbo in white, which was awful. And I suppose at that age, I started getting more and more interested in cars. Because we were quite close to London and there were lots of car garages, I would spend my time calling up the car garages and asking them to send me enormous amounts of brochures. So it didn't matter what the car was, I was just obsessed. So from Ford Escorts through to Ferraris, I would call up the garage and see if they'd send me a brochure. I ended up with thousands of brochures. From there, we moved from one end of the spectrum to the other. So from public school in London, I moved to Cornwall, which was a total culture shock. I mean, it was an extraordinary change in our lives. So my father went from working in a bank to owning his own business, which was a total revolution in our lives. I remember us moving and thinking, this is going to be great, this is going to be fabulous for us, we're going to move to the seaside. Little did I know about Cornwall. And I think for the first 6 months, people didn't really want to speak to me because I was the posh kid. People would walk up to me and say things like, go on boy, go on talk, don't you talk posh, don't you talk posh, for the first 6 months. And I suppose that sort of set the tone for living in Cornwall for quite some time. My first car that I learned to drive in was obviously the perfect car to learn to drive in. I mean, this would be the car that if you drove it, you could drive anything else afterwards, because they were all so similar after this car. He had a Citroen BX. Just ridiculous car to learn to drive in. It had the speedometer as a circle that went round. It had the indicators on the top rather than the indicators on the side. It had a brake that if you touched it, it would stand on its nose straight away. So a mad car to actually learn to drive in. And when I learned to drive, we used to go out, because it was Cornwall. The best thing about Cornwall was the roads. The roads are amazing. Although all wet, absolutely spectacular places to drive. And my father came up to me one day and said, Andy, there's a problem with the car. The pistons hold. It's not running. I mean, it needs a whole engine rebuild. Have you got any idea? And I thought, maybe. I think that was when I was with 4 friends up in the car. I think we hit 98 down the dual carriageway. That set the tone for me wanting to leave Cornwall. You know, Cornwall is a spectacular place to grow up, and driving roads are amazing. But I wanted out. I wanted to leave. I wanted to be out as quickly as I could, because the world was somewhere else. I was totally obsessed by cars, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to go and work for the car magazines. I'm going to go and spend my life working with the thing I love. So I wrote 45 letters to every car magazine in the UK, and only one responded, and that was Your Classic, and that was based in Teddington. That was Haymarket Publications. So whilst everybody else was doing their work experience, you know, at their local corner shop or their parents' business, I was out, I was gone, I was going to London. So I was up in London for the first week, absolutely loved it. So I've been the start of the 90s, I was going up all the time. So I think I did 7 lots of work experience eventually, at Autocar and Motor and What Car and Classic and Sports Car, which were all part of the same group for Haymarket. I loved every minute of it. I lived to leave Cornwall, drive up in my car and spend my time up in Haymarket. Whilst I was there, whilst it was a work experience, I was like the black sheep. And that's probably because I wasn't probably the easiest person to get on with. And at the time, I remember there was another chap who was there. And during that time, I didn't realise for, 25 odd years, that turned out to be Chris Harris, who was doing his work experience the same week as me in Autocar Motor that I was at Classic and Sports Car. And I really enjoyed my time. I found that I was a terrible journalist. I was absolutely awful. I couldn't write to save my life. They gave me a couple of opportunities. I tried, and it was just garbage. And so I thought I'd spend my time with the photographers. So I spent probably another 4 or 5 weeks with the photographers. I fell in love, loved every minute of it. Just felt that this was for me. This is what I wanted to do. The only thing that was a slight niggle in my side was that when I went round the magazines, I spoke to the journalists, I'd spoke to the photographers, and none of them afforded the cars they were driving. None of them could afford them. These were all brand new things, and I thought, I'm going to have to do something different if I actually want to own something like this. Otherwise, I'm going to get to borrow it for a week, and then I can give it back, and then I can borrow it for a week. And this was way before the days of Top Gear and people earning millions out of cars. It just wasn't very fashionable then. There was no money in it. The first one that got me was a Porsche 964. It was in marine blue. It was a wide-bodied car, and I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go out with Peter Dron, who is the test driver, out to Black Mountain in Wales to go and drive it. And as we were driving there, I'm like, so what do you think of this car? And I was buzzing. I thought it was absolutely amazing. He's like, yeah, it's a bit boring, isn't it? Yeah, this is not my real thing. Yeah, and I'm looking and thinking, you've got a brand new 911, you've got a Welsh mounted top, and this is not your thing? This is not great? He actually said to me at the time that what he really loved was a BMW E28 M5. That was his thing. He really wanted one of those. So that was followed by... I walked into the office one day and I heard somebody talking in the corner, and there was this little rumble of people discussing a car, and somebody was going out to drive it, and I was sort of earwigging on the conversation, and I was obviously basically the T-boy at that stage. And I remember them discussing there's a Ferrari thing going on, saying like, what Ferrari is it? It's an F40. I'm like, oh my God, it's an F40, it's an F40. Where is it? Where is it? They're doing Santa Pod Strip. I'm like, you're joking, you're doing a F40 at Santa Pod Strip? They went, yes, they're starting in about an hour and a half. I'm like, oh my God, right. I left, grabbed my keys and jumped in the car. Nobody could say anything to me. I was straight off to go and see it. And it turned out it was Andrew Frankel who was doing the 0 to 100 to 0 test in a Ferrari F40 for the first time with a chap called Mike Wilds, who's a Formula One driver. It was absolutely throwing it down that day. So it was like sheets of water coming down. Going up the M1, there was standing water across all the roads. It was horrific weather. I'm allowed to have a look round, not really allowed in the car. Andrew's in the car with Mike, and it turns out it's Nick Mason's car. So Nick Mason's allowed them to test it to see what this thing will do. The first run goes all right, second run goes okay, third run goes past. The car snaps wildly sideways and is almost at a 90-degree angle down the straight. So it's almost looking at the Armco as it snaps as they hit the brakes. I've never seen anything like it. So Mike brings it back, and it's straight by the end of it. And everybody's shaking at that stage. Everybody is absolutely wetting themselves because nobody can believe that the two of them are still standing there and there's not a scratch on the car. It's still in one piece. Towards the end of the day, it got drier and drier, and they basically nailed every tyre in the car. So you can see the braids coming through the edges of the car by the end of it. And at that stage, they're like, we've done it, we've achieved it, and it beats an RS200. And they say, so we're going to pack up. And I'm thinking, just one more thing, just one more thing. Would you mind taking me up? I have a chat with the chap who's there, and he says, yeah, we'll just do one run. The tyres have gone off. We can see all the metal braiding throughout the entire tyres. He says, right, we'll just go for one run. So it's dry at that stage. He accelerates. The whole world goes backwards. The V8, you can hear it. It sounds amazing. And I thought, this is flying. And then the turbos kicked in. The twin turbos kicked off, and my whole world went backwards. And it just exploded. And we just flew forward at such a speed. I'd never been that sort of speed. And I could not believe the speed of this thing. It was extraordinary as the turbos kicked in. The savagery of it was extraordinary. And at that stage, yeah, it just changed my entire world. And I went from liking lots of different cars to I wanted an F40. I wanted to own a Ferrari. I just couldn't believe how amazing it was. And I got to go home and drive back in my Toyota Corolla in brown with large marks on the doors, and to dream about one day having a Ferrari. So that was my first car. I had a 1.3 Toyota Corolla. Obviously at that age, I was looking through the classifieds, looking at the Triumph Spitfires, hoping for something exciting. My parents said, we'll go halves with you. You can have a couple £100. And the only thing we could find in the local area, it being Cornwall, was a Toyota Corolla 1.3 manual, rear-wheel drive, It was a bit like the AE86, I think it is, the coupe ones, except more rubbish. So it's like the saloon version of that, where they sort of stick a boot on the back of it. And mine was in a wonderful poo brown colour with a beige interior. So absolutely perfect to pick up the ladies. It was an amazing car. So I owned that car for 3 years. In the first year, my parents often borrowed it. And I think on the first occasion my father took it out, there was a gate that was open in a field, and he went to go and close the gate through the window of the car to just close it. The gate came back in and dented one side. Then a couple of months later, my mother took the car out and hit the other side. So I had dings in both sides of the doors at that stage. So it was a kind of scary looking car. But when I went back up to London to do the car magazines, it was amazing. It was just a fabulous car. It was the quickest car in London, particularly at the traffic light races. Because, if you're in a Porsche or Ferrari, you don't want to mess with the guy in the beaten up Toyota Corolla. There's a couple £100. So at the traffic light races, I was straight down there. I was always the winner, because all you do is just jink a little bit. They'd look at you and go, oh my God, he's just come towards me. And you've seen the amount of dents all over his car. I was straight off. So it was absolutely fabulous first car. Drove it up and down to London repeatedly from Cornwall, span it. I think, it's one of those cars that, looking back now, changed the way of what I thought of cars. Because it was rear-wheel drive, because I lived in Cornwall, the roads were always throughout, so Cornwall is wet from probably September through to May, June. So during that period, you have to learn how the back end of a car works in a rear-wheel drive, because otherwise you're straight off the road. And so that happened repeatedly. Each time you'd learn how to drift the car around a corner, and how to use a manual, how to make sure you could control the car. And that probably changed my opinion on what sort of things I wanted to drive at that stage. It was just a fabulous thing to keep. And I kept that, I think, for 3 years and probably 50,000 miles, until I think one day out in Cornwall with some friends, came around a corner and a tourist was there. They big high hedges on both sides. I came around a corner. They were in a Nova, hit the brakes, didn't stop, straight into us. And that was the end of that car. I wanted to be involved in photography. I loved the world, and I thought that, of the careers you could pick in photography, one of the best paid was actually fashion, because the advertising rates were amazing. So I moved to London, and I think it was the age of 17, I packed my car, got in it and drove with a couple of £100 in my pocket, and found myself somewhere to live, and off we went. And I spent 3 years working in fashion photography and advertising photography. I worked for a number of the magazines as an assistant, so I'd worked for Harper's & Queen, Vogue, Elle, Harper's Bazaar. We worked for Littlewood's catalogue. You name it, we did it. It was a fascinating thing to do. But I think that after 3 years, I found that it probably wasn't for me. I think there were a couple of things that did it. One was, I went on a shoot with a Vogue photographer, and I remember sitting there, and it was for the Milk Marketing Board. So this guy did all of the close-ups for jewellery, etc., for Vogue and Elle. And so he's a really, really well-known photographer, and he's brought in to do the Milk Marketing Board. And so I'm thinking, this should be interesting. They turn up with 50 boxes. These 50 boxes are about so big, and they've got 600 milk cartons in them. And my first role was to go through those 600 milk cartons and find the one that was perfect for them to photograph it. With the advertising photographers, we were using big plate cameras, so big 10-8s. The ad agency guy turned up, and he had a piece of tracing paper. And he'd marked it all out. And he came up and said, I want this. And he took the piece of tracing paper and he stuck it to the back of the screen. And he said, the photographer, that's what I'd like you to do. And that's what we did that day. We took 300, 400 pictures of them moved a millimetre, half a millimetre, a third of a millimetre. And after a day of doing that, I came home with a headache, and I thought, this is not what I had planned for the rest of my life. And I thought, actually, I'm done. And so I packed up my stuff and I moved home, which was possibly one of the most difficult things I've ever done, to have moved away at that age, at 18, and to have your freedom, and then to move back in with your parents, is extraordinarily difficult. To be in London, where the world's at your feet, where you're doing lots of exciting stuff regularly, and then to be back in Cornwall doing another set of qualifications to ensure that I could go to university was, it's one of those things that's either going to make you or break you. And there was no way it was breaking me. I was coming out again. I was leaving. These were the days before the internet, so there was no chance of you remotely commuting or doing something interesting or doing something in the art world. It just didn't happen. So I knew at that stage, you look around and you think, I've got to leave. I've got to leave if I want a decent career. If I want something like a Porsche or something, if I want a decent car, I can't live down here. I spent a year knuckling down and working really hard. I did my A-levels again, I did my GCSEs again, because I hadn't really tried very hard because I was going into an art career. So I did well. I did well enough to get to Anglia, which is one of the colleges in Cambridge. And a friend of mine had been there beforehand. And I went up to see him. And it totally blew my mind. From being in Cornwall, where basically there was virtually nobody around most of the year, and then there was a few holidaymakers in summer. Cambridge was a different world. I mean, it was extraordinary. So Cambridge as a city changes over summer, and I went in summer. So 50,000 tourists appear from across the globe and come to Cambridge. And I looked around, and there were exciting cars everywhere. You go out for a dinner party, and it was just the most extraordinary time. So you go to a dinner party there, and somebody would say, "What do you do for a living?" And somebody would look at me next door to you and they go, "Well, I'm studying the sexual organs of bumblebees." And you'd be like, "Sorry, you're studying the sexual organs of bumblebees?" "Yeah." "Okay." And the other side, you'd look at them and say, "So, trepidatiously, obviously, after that one, you want to tread carefully. What do you do?" And somebody next door to me went, "I'm a goat herder." I'm like, "Sorry, what did you just say?" He was like, "I'm a goat herder. My father owns the largest district of Azerbaijan." And I'm like, how does this even happen in one room? And from doing a couple of weeks at Cambridge, it just blew my mind. And I was going to be there no matter what. So I finished my GCSEs and A-levels again and off to Cambridge. And I loved Cambridge. I spent 7 years there. In the first year, I went to university, really enjoyed it, enjoyed myself probably rather too much. At the end of the year, I'd started doing punting, so pushing people up and down the river and doing river guide tours, basically on commission only, selling. And I loved it. I absolutely buzzed off it every day. I was just there, and it was almost like being on stage. So as you come down the river, you probably got 600 or 700 people watching you at any one stage. They all come up to you, they all want to know about you, they want to understand, and you could set your price on an hourly basis. So how much ever you wanted to earn, they had a really weird system with the company. So the company would say, "Charge what you like. If they all pay it, we'll give you a third." So absolutely loved every moment of it. And I'd started doing that over summer, and university sort of drifted off into the background. And I spent my summer punting, getting drunk, sort of hanging out, and I bought my first sports car. I bought a Fiat X19 in bright red. It was a terrible car. I absolutely loved it. It was amazing to drive. Drift it sideways at all stages. I thought I was it. I thought I'd made it now. Until obviously the end of summer, where basically everybody else went back to university, and I thought, oh shit, what the hell am I going to do? So all my friends went back to university, and I thought, I'm not going home. I'm never going home. So I'm going to have to get a job. So what can I find? And I went into a local agency, and they had, and at that stage, I was at the stage of my life where I would have taken any job that was going, anything that had any contact with people was great. Anything so I didn't have to go back to Cornwall and I could start. And I took a job cancelling and starting direct debits, which is possibly one of the most soul-destroying jobs on the face of the planet. So this was a job where you take calls and they give you a list of paperwork and you key it, and it was data entry. And they used to have a thing where you had to get to 98% rightness. So your keying had to be 98% correct on any occasion. And so I spent 9 months doing it, 9 months data inputting with saying yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, in what was basically like I suppose if you watch things like The Office, it was like that. Oh God, I've got to leave. I came home every day with a headache for 9 months. And I thought that, you know, this is interesting. I'm staying in Cambridge, that's fabulous. But what else is there around there? And I obviously done a bit of sales, and I thought, let's go and have a look, see what will be out there. And I saw a job to go into property. And I think they had 85 applications. And I was told, just don't bother. You don't expect to hear from us. You won't hear from us. About a week later, I got a call. They said, will you come and see us? They'd interviewed 12 people. I was probably the youngest. I think at that stage I was 20. And I got the job, basically selling houses. And it was something that I didn't know anything about. I had no idea about houses. I'd never bought a house. I had no idea what I was doing. But I just wanted to do a sales career. I wanted a job which put me in front of people where I could do what I did when I was punting. When I was punting, I was top salesman of the year. I was leagues ahead of everybody else. I used to basically turn up at 10 a.m. and disappear at sort of 3. And I'd beaten everybody else during that time period just because I wouldn't be stopped. I was a person that would go up to anybody and say, hey, how are you? Would you like to come punting? You know, there was a list of people, and I'd be there at the front every time. So I thought that, you know, sales has got to be my thing. I've got to do this. If you're not going to university, and you're not doing that, the only way you're going to make money out of this is you're going to need to do arts, or you're going to have to work for yourself in some way, or you're going to do sales. And I thought, sales, I'll go and do that. So I spent, I think, 12 months at the estate agency. First months were fabulous, absolutely amazing. The leads came through the door. We had Rolodexes where you'd write down on the card who'd come in and what they wanted. I was also on Saturdays. Sundays I'd be there, and I basically worked every hour that God sent. For the first 3 months, I cleaned up. And so I was in there with my manager, my assistant manager, and another chap they'd employed from another estate agency. I basically cleared up. I made all the sales. And after 3 months, I realised I was the most hated person in the office because there was only a limited amount of stock and a limited amount of money to go around. So each time I made a sale, I took the money out of somebody else's pockets. And I found that I was, without a doubt, the most hated man that had been in Cambridge. And the Saturday woman turned up in a Golf GTI, a new one. I thought, wow, that's really cool. I'd love to have one of those. And I started chatting with her. And it turned out she worked in software. And I chatted to her at length, and I thought, you've just bought that out of software and you're doing the Saturday work for us? I think I should probably apply for a few jobs in software. And it being Cambridge, I knew nothing, and I contacted 6 agencies. I got 6 interviews, and I got 6 job offers. And I was absolutely blown away. So I went from earning like virtually nothing to, really decent-sized basics. I think I was on 20 grand basic. My on-target was 70 or 80. Electric. I started a telemarketing company within their company. So it's a software company. They said, basically, here's a telephone book. We want to sell to top 100s. We want to sell to directors. This is what we do. Go and sell it. I thought, I have no idea how to do this. I just don't know how to do this. So you plot a course and you think, right, okay, so we'll do a list of the top 100 companies. And so that all went into the database. So we had every single director of every top 100. And then what we do is look through those and look for individual pitches within that we can actually offer. So the company I worked for did a number of different things. And it was an amazing proving ground to understand how to sell and what to sell. So it was business process improvement, business alignment, and basically it was based on a weird system of knowing why you wanted to do anything. So you test everything you did with why. And it was an amazing place to understand how to sell, because you did it to yourself the whole time. You'd spend your time saying, but why am I doing this? Does this go towards my aim? Does this work? So when I'm doing this, does this achieve my goal? So you start off with your goal, work back through, and then you'd understand what you had to do to achieve your goal. And so I started up the telemarketing in the UK, and then I was promoted, taken on 2 or 3 people. The company started to open up in the States, and they said, would I go out and start the operation in the States? And I thought, never been to the States before, really wasn't my thing. A friend was getting married out there, and it was a free ticket. So I was like, bang, yeah, I'm in. Let's do this. So I got rid of the X19. That was, fallen to pieces, rusted into a small heap on the ground. I bought myself an MX-5. They just started importing them. I got it in, I can't remember what it was. It was a light blue colour, and it had been raced in Japan. And they brought this thing over. It had massive wide wheels on it, and it ran on aircraft fuel in Japan when they raced it. And it bilged black smoke at all occasions. I remember sitting in a queue in a traffic jam, and in an hour it went through the whole tank of petrol. It did virtually 6 miles to the gallon. I loved it. It was a wonderful thing. And I swapped that out for, I think I bought a Civic Del Sol. Now there's a name from the past. I drove up to Manchester to go and pick that up with the roof that lifts off. It was just, the engine was manic, it was amazing. It was a terrible car. It was awful. The gearbox was great, but every time you turned up, people just took the piss out of you because it just looked like a hairdresser's car. So it was fabulous to drive, particularly when the VTEC kicked in, but it was just, awful. I was asked to start up a division in the company in the States, and for 2 years, that's what I did. I would fly in, be 2 weeks off, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks in the UK, 2 weeks back in the US. And I started the division in that company. We went from myself starting it up to 25 members of staff, which I was responsible for recruiting. Our revenues went from, I think our average deal size was like 20 grand up to 2-3 million in that time period. We went from, being a regional software company to selling to the CTO of Merrill Lynch. So the company changed enormously during that period, and I loved it. My favourite car out there, Dodge Ram pickup, absolutely amazing thing. But they gave it to me because they had no other compacts that day, so the company paid for it. And every time I came back, I'd have a chat to the guy on the desk before I arrived, tell him there's nothing left. We've only got a Dodge Ram. So I would rock up in a Dodge Ram, looking over the top of the Range Rovers when I was out there. Absolutely loved that car. Back in the UK, I'd obviously raised a little bit, and I bought myself a Porsche 944 Cabriolet. Would drift sideways as soon as you went over the white lines on a road in the wet, drift sideways. I owned it for almost 4 months. At that stage, I was sacked. I had bought a 944. I had just brought in the largest deal the company had ever done, and I was on for a £110,000 bonus, and I was 24. The senior sales directors weren't on that sort of money, and the fact I turned up in a red Porsche 944 made the directors very nervous, and that they had mentioned it on a number of occasions, and that was that. And so I thought, what the hell am I going to do with my world? I mean, I'm 25, I've just hit the biggest sales target, been sacked just before my bonus comes in. So, you sort of take a deep breath and say, okay, what's next? Well, what the hell am I going to do next? I've only been chatting about a software company that I'd heard of, and they had some software, and I didn't know anything about it. I knew nothing. At that stage, the 944 exited the next day. I sold it that day, and a VW Golf GTI turned up. Mark II 16 valve in blue. It was a lovely car. It was known by my girlfriend as Andy's knackered Volkswagen because it had the number plate AKV on the side of it, and it was a rubbish tip, basically, because I was spending my time with this other company trying to start a company. The car was trashed at all stages. It was just like a mobile dustbin. There was wrappers and cigarette packets and cans all over it. And at that stage, I'd basically decided that clearly I'd been sacked. And it happened a few times. And you get to a stage in life where you think, this just keeps happening to me. Maybe life's just trying to tell you something. It's like, right, okay, self-employment. Right, time to go self-employed and try something new. And that's where the future is, that's where the money is. If I want to have the cars that I've seen, if I want the life I want, you're going to have to go for it. We started a software company, and for 9 months worked on it. At the end, I think I was running out of cash. We weren't quite getting there. We were looking for venture capital funding to get it to work. So I went for 3 job interviews, got offered 3 jobs. The most important thing to me about those jobs is what car would I get? And 2 of them said they would give me a bog standard Euro box. And one of them said, we like you. If you want to take a job with us, we'll give you a Subaru Impreza Turbo. And I was like, bang, I'm in. Let's do this. So I took that role. They ordered the car. The day before my Impreza turned up, we got venture capital funding. And so I was out. So from doing really well in one company, obviously I was frog-marched off the premises at that stage for having ordered me a new car. And the day before it turned up, I said, I'm really sorry, but we've got venture capital funding in my business. I'm off. So that was it, I was out. Yeah, so the first thing I did was I took out a contract and I bought a Subaru Impreza Turbo. The only one I could find. This is the stage where they were very rationed in the UK and it just come out, so they were really difficult to get hold of. And the only one I could find was an Inverness. So yeah, it's Christmas. Christmas comes and goes. I'm still living in Cambridge doing this work. I convinced a friend, right, we're going to fly. So we fly up to Inverness on New Year's Eve. On the way up, the plane is delayed and delayed and delayed. So we're supposed to be flying out at 2. It gets delayed to 4, 6, 8. We're like, oh my God, are we actually going to get there? Are we just not going to bother and go another day? Eventually, our call comes at 9:30. At 9:30, we get on the flight. We arrive at 11:30. And I've been calling the dealership saying, please, please stay open. Please stay open. We're still coming. We're still coming. So we get up there, it's ice everywhere, there's snow banks like this on all sides, and I'm still coming, and I don't care if there's snow on the ground, I don't care about the salt, we're going, this is my new Impreza, this is my first brand new car, I'm going to be there no matter what. So we rock up there, the bloke is there, we take sort of 20 minutes to get, he says, should we go through your car? No, I've got to go home, I'm driving home, back to Cambridge tonight. So this is probably where we're leaving the dealership at 12:30 at night. So we drive down and we're en route, we're like, I'm not going to make this. I'm just, I've been up since 6 a.m. It's now 2:30 in the morning. I'm miles from home. We're just not going to make it home. So I think, right, I was seeing a girl who was in Sheffield at the time. I said, why don't we just drop in there on the way back? She's halfway down. It'll be no problem at all. So we get to her, we're getting close to Sheffield at like 4 o'clock in the morning. There's still snow on most of the roads. It's sort of breaking up in other parts. As we come towards her place, she's on a steep hill. We start to come down the hill. I didn't realise I didn't grit the road. So we come down the road, I hit the brakes really hard. We hear judda, 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 judda as the ABS kicks in. And I'm looking towards the pavement, and the side of the pavement's coming towards me. It's a great big pavement. I'm looking at it thinking, shit, I'm doing 30 miles an hour. We're going to hit the pavement, bang, the car's going to go over. I'm just going to have written off my brand new car. And it's a really scary point where you just keep hitting the brakes and nothing happens at all because it's sheet ice. The car keeps going. At the last minute, I look down and I see a drain. There's an old drain with a rigid drain cover. And at the last minute, I'm like, I don't know what to do now. I've got no idea what I'm doing. Right, hit the accelerator as hard as you can at that point. One wheel catches. We get slammed off and down to the bottom of the hill. And sweat dripping. There's the 2 of us, me and my mate, in the car going, oh my God, Jesus, I thought we were going to write the car off then. But we get to the bottom of the hill. The car is fine, unmarked. So yeah, that was a fabulous car. Owned that for about a year and a half. Loved it. It was way too fast for me. Used to come around corners, way too fast in it. It was a car that drove you to drive like a lunatic. You want to be a Wally. Subaru Impreza Turbo is like the ideal car. You don't feel the speed. You can do whatever speed you like. If you come into a corner and there's somebody stood in front of you in the road, it will stop. It's fine. You just don't have to worry about it. So yeah, love that car. Absolutely wonderful thing. The software company, at 25, you think you know everything. As usual, we got the investment. It went horribly wrong again. So that company is now called SagePay. and obviously did incredibly well, but I was not part of it at that stage. So at that stage, the Subaru Impreza goes out the door. I'm like, what do I do next? And I've just bought myself a Lotus. I bought myself a thing called a vegan tuner Vanti, which is a Lotus built in the 90s. So it's like a Lotus Elan with a 170 brake. In British Racing Green, it's got Connolly leather, it's got Wilton carpets, it's just fabulous. I love this thing. The engine goes wrong and it needs retuning. So it goes back on the rolling road, and then every month for the next year, it goes back on the rolling road. Every single month it goes back in and it goes back on the rolling road. I still love this car, still fabulous. Keep driving it. It comes to about a year later, I'm doing better. It goes back in and gets refurbished, so everything gets done in it, the engine gets rebuilt. Still love this car. It comes back, it's all done, it's all pristine, and then it goes back in again. And each month it gets retuned again as the engine goes out of tune, because it's got 170 brakes, so it's significantly more powerful than a Lotus Elan. That car then eventually gets sold. You get to a stage in life where you look at it and go, how many times can I take the same car back into the same garage and have it checked over? But it keeps my flame alive of the cars, and I'm on a path now. So I think that lots of people get to a stage in life and they've got this picture in their mind of what cars they should own at what age. And I know at that age, I certainly had a picture in my mind of what I thought I should be having. And I'd gone from software into property, and in 9 months, I'd been in the company. We'd gone from 2 people to 90 people. We were turning over from, $1 million a year to 300 million a year in 9 months. So savage growth, extraordinary time to learn. And I bought a number of properties, and I think that I bought, on the first day I bought one. My girlfriend said, are you mad? You bought a property in a town you've never been to, and you've never seen the flat, and it's not built yet? I said, yeah, I have. And then I bought 4 more the next day. and the ball started rolling. And then a couple of weeks later, I bought another 2, and then I bought another 4, and I just kept going. My girlfriend at the time, now my wife, said that at that stage of my life, for 10 years, I bought a new car to me every 8 weeks for 10 years. So now I've owned more than 120 cars. And yeah, my car buying went savagely out of control. And anything was in, anything I could have, I would have. So at the age of 20, I think it was 26, my father came into an inheritance and he said, I've seen how many properties you bought. This is just nuts. Would you do it for me? And I said, yeah, of course I would, Dad. And he said, I think it was £3 million worth of property. And I thought, okay, fair enough. And I said to him, look, I don't want cash. I'm just not interested in cash. What I want is a Porsche. Get me a Porsche, and that'll be great. And so the deal was struck. So he'd get a £3 million worth of portfolio of property, which normally people would charge you sort of $250,000 for. And I'd just get a second-hand Porsche. That was my dream. 911, I'm in, bang, that's done. I'm looking for a 964. I always loved 964s, particularly after my history of having seen it before in the car magazines. Loved 964s. Started looking for 964s. My father says, I've been thinking. And you think, oh God, what's coming next? He says, well, I bought the property portfolio. Well, I might need some cash for it. So, if I buy it on finance, would that be okay? And you think, yeah, that's fine. It's still a Porsche. It's still 911. I still get it. That's good. Went back to the finance company. 964's out the door. Too old. New Porsche had been a 996. I didn't want one of those. So 993 was next. So 993, Carrera 2 cab. I'd fallen in love with cabriolets, the wind in your hair motoring, so you don't go so fast, but you still get the same buzz. So 993 arrived, fabulous, loved the 993. Still owned the Volkswagen at that point, and I was living on an island in the Thames in a wooden house, which is a very, very strange place to live. I bought a day car as well. Because I had a bit of cash around, I thought, why don't I just buy a cheap day car? And at the time, a cheap day car to me was a Mercedes 190 Cosworth. So the Volkswagen was parked out down the road, and one day I came back and somebody nicked the wheels. I didn't think anything of it because I had the Porsche, I had the Mercedes, I was raking in money, so I was working every day that God sent. And you know, a few weeks went past and I just didn't think about it because I had the other cars, I was driving them. I bought myself a new flat in another place. The car was back where I used to live. Came back one day and it was gone. And it had been towed by the council. So I never saw Andy's knackered Volkswagen again. And I'm assuming it went to the big crusher in the sky. The Mercedes was there for a while. My wife hated it. My girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, absolutely hated it. It was, I think it's called Smoke Silver, which she happily described to all her friends and family as, my boyfriend's bought a car, it's in hearing aid beige. So it's a sort of, the sort of colour that only a pensioner would pick. So it's a sort of smoke silver. You know, that was the one that all the race drivers used to have. That was the one that Ayrton Senna drove, but to her, no, absolutely not. It was pensioner's car, awful. Particularly with the wing on the back. She's like, I'm not going in that thing. I'm just, you know, you can drive it if you want. I'm never going in it though. And so that sort of got pushed to a side. That was a perfect car. That had 40,000 miles. It had been owned by a Mercedes mechanic. It had full Mercedes service history. He'd restored all of it. So it was a pristine car. I think I must have got $3,000 for it, maybe $4,000 for it at the time. But I had the Porsche, so, you know, it was all good. It was all good. Life started, kept on improving. We kept on buying properties. And I think that during when I was working for the company that did hundreds of them, it came to a point where, yet again, I'd made quite a bit of money. And I was called into the office again, and they said, yeah, it's not working. It's not working. You just bought a load of property. We're not happy. Sorry, that's the end of your job. And I thought, oh, shit, I've done it again. I've just done it again. What on earth? Clearly, it is something about me that means I have to be fired repeatedly. So I walked out the door. I had loads of cash in the bank because I'd completed a load of properties. And I thought, you know what? Why don't I do this myself? And that afternoon, I got a call from somebody who I knew. And they said, would you get me a property? And I said, yeah, let's do this. And then I walked into a building site. And I got a discount on 5 properties. And I sold 2 to my friend. I bought one myself. And then the person who turned up to give me life insurance, I sold 2 to them that day. And suddenly I went from, you know, having no job whatsoever to I suddenly had, I think I'd made 70 grand in 4 days after walking out. And the ball was rolling at that stage. You know, I was off. And that was in my bedroom. That company was, and we started it there. Then we moved on to Watford. We've got big offices there, so I had a business partner who's based near Watford, so we moved up to Watford. And my car buying, yeah, that's when it started to go totally nuts. So my girlfriend lived in a Victorian terrace, and I thought, I'm going to have a Ferrari. You know, Ferrari before I'm 30, but let's do this. I think I was 28. I was like, what do you want? I think I'm going to have a 355 convertible. Porsche went off to be sold, and I had no garage. I had no off-road parking. I was in Victorian terrace land, and I had this 355. So the 355, never seen one before. I'd only seen them basically twice at Goodwood, I think, at the time. I'm one of those people that didn't want a red Ferrari. It just wasn't my thing. I wanted a different colour. So I looked through and I set my heart on a Le Mans blue. So Le Mans blue Spider. So that turned up and I had nowhere to put it. So when it turned up, they had to meet me in Sainsbury's car park where they handed me the keys. And I took delivery of it then. And the first thing I did, it turned up the day before I'd booked the ferry to France. And the next morning we drove to France and we did 2,000 miles across France on it. Absolutely loved it, fabulous thing. It made every door vibrate across my journey. So, you know, you go through, I think we went through Toulouse, and they had in one of the town centres, it had doors that were 20 foot tall, big old oak wooden doors. And I sat in a traffic queue, and the exhaust was so loud on it that it made all the doors vibrate. And you could hear this thing from miles away. I absolutely loved that car. So I had that for about a year. During that time, I got beaten off the lights a couple of times in it. It was really embarrassing because obviously, the 355 is an absolute genius car if you're on it. It's got no torque at all. It's got virtually no torque, so it doesn't really pull if you're in the wrong gear. And I'd got caught out by a couple of diesel BMWs. And I was like, I'm not having that. I'm just not having that. So I thought at that stage, why don't we try a different car? And at that stage, I thought I'm going to have a 550. So the 355 went up for sale, and I bought myself a day car. And then I got some storage, so my day car had changed, and I bought Range Rovers, old-fashioned Range Rovers. I thought, right, it's the first one I bought of a guy, and it was chauffeured all of its life. It had 40,000 miles on it. It was beautiful, blue thing. I didn't have anywhere to park it, and it was outside my girlfriend's a lot of the time. And one weekend, we went up to see my in-laws, who, it was her birthday, and they bought her a barbecue. So we stuck that in the back of the car. The car had been off and on having issues with the tailgate and the alarm system. So the tailgates on them go wrong, they rattle, and in the wind, the alarm systems go off. So you can imagine, at that stage, everybody hates me. All the people in Victorian Terrace Land are like, who is this pillock who keeps on waking us up at 3 o'clock in the morning with his Range Rover? So we come back, and I think, right, they're going to kill me, so I'll put it in the local car park. So there's a Waitrose around the corner. It has 30-foot walls on 2 different sides. And I think, that's the perfect place to put it. Nobody can hear it. I can't even hear it from there. So I put it in the corner, lock it up, and leave it. I come back next day, and there's a fire truck. There's a load of police there. There must be 15, 20 policemen hanging around. And I drive into the car park, and I'm thinking, I can't see it. I can't see my car. I don't know where it is. I'm sure I parked it over there. And there's a tow truck that's sitting there, and there's this guy in the tow truck. And I drive up to him, wind down the window, and say to him, hey, mate, my Range Rover, have you seen it? There was a blue Range Rover parked over there. He went, what? Over there, I parked my blue Range Rover. And he went, the one that blew up. I'm like, this just doesn't compute to me. It doesn't make any sense. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. No, it was just over there, my blue Range Rover, I parked it there last night. Yeah, the one that blew up. And at this stage, it takes a little while, and he's obviously looking at me, and the brain cogs are churning still very, very slowly. I'm like, what do you mean? He was like, yeah, it blew up last night. And I look over, and all I can see left of that car is they're scraping the tarmac. And because it's a car that's made of aluminium, there's a pool of aluminium on the floor, and they're just sticking this in the back of the truck, and that's all that's left of this car. And it turned out that somebody had tried to break into it. Obviously, the alarm had gone off, because it always went off, and they'd flicked some match into it, and then it exploded. And that was the end of my first Range Rover. Yeah, I loved it, and then followed a series of Range Rovers. I think I've had 8, 9 classics. I've had 4, 5 LSEs. I think I've had 22 Range Rovers in total. So yeah, they've become a bit of a passion. At the same point, I swapped the other car. So I've got a Ferrari. 355 goes off for sale. They say, do you want to try a 550? I'm like, yeah, let's do this. Let's try the 550. Obviously, I know, James, you've had one. Just blows your mind. Just the torque on it is amazing. Second gear is really strong in the Porsche. 5th gear feels like second gear in a 550 Maranello. Absolutely extraordinary thing. I ring up, and I'm thinking, I want one. I'm going on holiday again soon. I'm going off to France and Italy for driving holiday again, so here we come. Let's get a 550 in time. Keep looking out for them. There's one going for sale. It's a bit more than I want to pay. It's beautiful, a perfect car, but it's a bit more than I want to spend. 3 weeks beforehand, 2 weeks beforehand. It looks like this might be the only one that's available, particularly with low mileage. It's at Kent High Performance. So I'm like, the day before I'm thinking, oh my God, I really want to take a different car. So we're like, right, let's do this. So I speak to my girlfriend and I say, we're going to go and swap cars tomorrow. She's like, you're mad. You want to swap cars tomorrow morning before we're going to ferry? Yeah. So we're up at 5. Drive down to Kent High Performance. sitting there waiting for it to open. The guy's like, "Oh, didn't expect to see you here. I thought you didn't want this one." So we look around the car. It's pristine. It's absolutely perfect. It's got 10,000 miles on it. It's Argento silver with black leather interior. I'm like, this is gorgeous. I speak to the finance company. We're sorting out the finance. So an hour later, the finance is done. An hour after that, the insurance is done. And we dump the other car, the Range Rover, and we're off on the ferry. So we do 5,000, I think it's 5,000 miles, right the way across Europe in this thing over the next 2-3 weeks. Fall absolutely in love with it. It's just amazing car, particularly at speed. Worst journey in it was definitely the Italian Alps. So coming over from France across to Italy. We're going up through the Alps, absolutely no problem whatsoever. 550 is quite a large car, quite broad. As we start coming down, the road starts thinning and thinning and thinning, and there's not much space. And a couple of times I have a couple of squeaky bum moments when a lorry or a coach tries to squeeze past us. And as we start coming down, I start seeing some headlights behind me, and they're chasing and they're coming quick, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what the hell is this? And they're catching and catching and catching. You know, there must have been half a mile before, and they catch me so fast. I'm looking in the rear-view mirror. I'm thinking, what the hell is this thing? And it's a Vauxhall Cavalier from the mid-'80s. And as we start coming around the bends, I look in my rear-view mirror, and there's a woman in her 80s or 90s who's got a hand going beep, 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 trying to force me out of the way. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm completely puckered coming down this hill as we come past these trucks. And I'm obviously trying to breathe in to get the car thin enough to go past the coaches. And the woman is on her horn the whole time. So we go down there for 2 hours. She is rammed right the way up my boot, on it with her hand on the horn until we get to the bottom. She comes past like this. But yeah, apart from that, it was a non-eventful journey. Yeah, fabulous thing. Only sold it because I married then, and my wife became pregnant, and we're like, okay, we've got to have more cars and more seats. At that stage, I'd also bought 2 Minis. I bought an X-Works Mini Cooper, which was my day car, which is a really stupid day car. So that one, a lot of our cars at the time had names. So that one was called Patchy, because it had patches on the doors instead of round doors, so you could put the numbers on it. So that had been rallied through the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, and was a total rust bucket. Twin exhausts on it. It had all the period accessories. So it had the Les Leston wheel on it. It had the, I think the Webasto seats that were on it, which were all the sort of aftermarket special things they used when this car had been used for rallying. And it basically had never been washed. This car had never been touched. And that was my day car for probably about 7 months. And the engine started to go wrong, and it started to go worse and worse and worse because it had been thrashed within an inch of its life. And I thought, I've got a great idea. Why don't I just swap the engine in it? Keyboard warrior at midnight one day on eBay, and somebody's just put up an X-Works Metro engine on it. So this thing's got 140, 150 brake. I'm like, that is the bad boy I want in my car. So the car is popping and farting, and I drive it down to Somerset to have the new engine fitted. And it just ekes in, so there's a large traffic jam to get there. Black smoke is bilging out the back of it, and we arrive. I leave it, take a cab back to the train station and back home. A couple of weeks later, the car turns up with this X-Works Metro engine in it. Now, obviously, I was commuting in it through heavy traffic. What I didn't realise at the time was it came with a clutch. It was a full works clutch, which was off or on, and off and on. So basically, you go into traffic jam, you bunny hop continually, and you'd be basically the traffic light warrior. So you'd be like, and you know, that lasted for about 3 months before it became slightly wearing. My wife had decided at that stage she wasn't ever going in it, and Patchy at that stage went back in, and he had new rose jointed suspension put on it, new brakes, new interior. Obviously it had the new engine. And yeah, that was used as a sort of second car. We also had Mickey. Mickey was a John Cooper Works Mini with the 5-speed box, which had about 3,000 miles on it. I also had Dave, which was a Series 2 Land Rover. Bad purchase. Bad purchase. Dave was rebuilt by a guy who was absolutely pristine. So Series 2 Land Rover in blue, perfect condition. So the guy had loved it to an inch of its life, polished it all of its life. The only thing he hadn't done was put sound deadening in it. There was something wrong with the brakes. So if you hit the brakes hard, it would try and kill a pedestrian. It would just turn left. And one day I'd convinced my wife that we wanted to go up and see a chap who was selling some paintings, and he happened to be in Norfolk. And I'd never driven this car more than probably 2 miles, 3 miles at a time. And I didn't know how fast it went. I knew nothing about this thing. I'd only just bought it. And I convinced her, right, we're going to drive to Norfolk in it from Buckinghamshire. Oh my God, 7 hours. 7 hours in the car it took at a constant 40 miles an hour. Had no sound deadening in. By the time we arrived, our ears are ringing. Absolutely ringing in this thing. It was just an awful car. Every time we came around a corner, it would judder. Every time you come up to a junction, it'd try and kill a pedestrian. It was just terrible. The 550 goes and is sold, and I look around and think, what can I have next? And I want something with 4 seats so I can put my newly born son in it. So I'm looking for something cheap, so something reasonably priced to actually do it, and a Rolls-Royce Corniche comes up. And I'm looking again, Rolls-Royce Corniche. Never had no idea what it was. Didn't know virtually anything about it. I convinced my wife to take me up to Cheshire to go and buy it. So it's blue on blue. It has one owner, and it's called Topless. And because the number plate was TPS, this car had been bought at Jack Barclay, brand new, for its one owner, who'd had it the entirety of its life. As I pay, the money leaves my account. And I look through the paperwork, and the dealer shuffles the paperwork a bit in front of me, and I think, that's a bit unusual. He sort of did a weird shuffle then. I don't know what he's doing. And I look through, and it turns out the car's been written off. She had got a bit too merry on her way back from Ascot and had ploughed into a wall in it. and the money's already left my account by this stage. I'm like, okay, great. So I've just bought a half written off Rolls-Royce Corniche. And the car had been around the world with her, so she got married 4 or 5 occasions. And so this car had been in Texas, it had been in southern France for her 3 or 4 different marriages. And she'd only clearly decided to part with it because of the crash. Actually, it sounds really weird, but I started using it as my day car. So at that stage, the property investment company done very, very well. We'd moved from our offices in Watford to Mayfair and then into the Royal Exchange buildings next door to the Bank of England. And we was taking a whole of the floor of the Reuters building. And basically, it looked like I'd nicked my father's car. So I'd turn up in work, and I was probably 30 at the time. So I'd turn up in a Rolls-Royce convertible. And people would constantly look at me and think I'd nicked my dad's car. It was a wonderful car to commute in. I absolutely loved it. It was just fabulous. Went on holiday in it repeatedly, just wonderful. Took my son, I think that was the first performance or first interesting car my son went in when he was probably about 4 days old. The only problem is it had some problems and started to go into the garage. So I thought, I've got a bit of space, because I'd bought a house with a number of garages, and I thought, probably should get something else to drive. So I bought a Bentley Continental R, one of the last ones, with the sort of Cosworth engine in it. And then that became my day car. And I commuted into work in that for about 7-8 months. It was a fabulous car. Terrible on corners, absolutely awful. It would roll, it was a wallowy thing, and it just made puffs and whoosh sounds at all times because of the turbos as it kicked in. So I had those two. I really, really loved the Corniche. The Continental R really probably didn't do it for me. I think that in some cases, the specification makes the car. You know, if you get the right car in the wrong specification, it makes it just a terrible car to own. And you look at it and it makes you feel differently about it. So this was in Ming Blue with crema, and I'm not a man for crema. That's just totally my worst nightmare to have crema, because as soon as you sit in it, it gets marked. And I tend to use my cars. So, you know, the Ferrari I think in 6 months, I put 5,000 miles on it. I like to drive them and to use them. So this was just useless. So that went off. My other day car, which I'd purchased a couple of months earlier, I'd always fancied an Overfinch Range Rover. I'd looked at them and thought, oh my God, at this stage, Overfinch had just gone into administration and had disappeared. And I picked at that moment to buy the 6.3, the big boy. And it was a P38, so the big square boxy one, which meant obviously nothing really worked on it. It had, I think, 450 brake horsepower. I think it was an LS1 engine in it, so basically out of a Corvette, which was sort of wedged in the front of it. I brought it home. It had great big wheels on it. It looked a bit ridiculous. It was worse in the flesh than when I bought it. And I bought it sight unseen. I wired the money, so, you know, it was my car. I was going to have it. My wife took one look at it and went, oh my God, what have you purchased? And it was a hilarious car. So it would make an enormous amount of noise, wouldn't go any faster. You put your foot to the floor, it would just drain the tank. The tank would just go as you drove it. I think I was averaging 6 miles per gallon in it. It had a few problems with it in the first couple of months. So being a Range Rover, it had the air suspension on it. Being a Corvette engine, it had a totally different engine in it. So you take it to Range Rover, Land Rover, to have a look at it, and they'd go, I don't know what you got in there, but I'm not touching it. So you think, okay, so Land Rover won't touch it. So I took it to American car specialists, and they'd look at it and go, oh my God, hasn't that got air suspension in it? I'm not touching that. I'm not going near that car. And it quickly got the nickname, the MF Range Rover. As my wife had nicknamed it, the mother Range Rover, because it never go anywhere. Bloody useless thing. It would basically stop on any occasion. It would drain the tank. It would drain the battery. It just never ran. So the amount of curtailed journeys in that car was extraordinary. I must have had 20-odd journeys where we just never got anywhere. You get in it, drive for an hour, the car would stop. Great. You would almost set your watch and say, right, so if we want to leave, why don't we call the AA now? They'll be here in 2 hours and we'll get home about 4. So you arrive where you wanted to arrive, plan your lunch, and call the AA before you started lunch for the AA to arrive after you finished lunch and then to take you home. So that lasted a little bit. At that stage, we were living in Buckinghamshire. The property investment company had done amazingly, and we decided to move in central London. Because the commute was quite great at the time, I thought we would move into central London, and I started to look at other cars at the time. And I think that this was just before the riots in London. So the riots were right the way across our area of London and South London as well. And basically a lot of people started breaking into any shops they could find. The pubs were done over, the bookies were done over. And at that point, we were living in a small terrace street in central London. And, you know, it sort of changes your world when you see that and you've got kids. And I thought, I had a bit of spare cash, and I quite like cars. And I saw an advert in MOD Sales, which is a company up on the A1, which specialises in ex-MOD cars. And they said they've got some Armoured Jaguars. And I thought, there's a plan. No matter what happens, you know, we've got an armoured car, we're fine. Drove up there, up the A1, up to Newark to go and see it, see all the lines and lines of Land Rovers and snatch Land Rovers and army vehicles. And inside one shed, they've got 6 of them. They've got 6 of these Jaguars. They were all commissioned by Tony Blair, and they were, I think, 450,000 at the time. And I think at that point, you know, if you wanted a Ferrari 550, that was 170 grand. So this was twice the price of a Ferrari 550, enormously expensive thing. Was armoured, so you get different levels of armouring. So you get B3, which is handgun. I obviously didn't know this beforehand. So that's handgun. Then you have B6, which is live large rounds. And then you have B7 and B8. B8 is basically government only. B7 is IUDs, so it's bombs, bomb-proof cars. And this is B8, so I'm like, hey, we're in here. This is perfect. We'll rock up in that. We'll drive around that in London. The things they don't tell you about ex-MOD cars. So the first thing was there's a couple of bits wrong with it because they don't fix anything on those cars. They are as they stand. So as they come out, this is the way they are. And you think, okay, I'll take it. I don't think it was a lot of money. I think it was like 15 or 20 grand. I speak to them about it. They're like, well, there's only one place in the UK that will actually do this work, and that's Jaguar. And I think, okay. So we call up Jaguar, and I say that there are some bits wrong with it. And they say, yeah, do you know which parts you need? No idea. I've got no idea. It's an armoured car. This is the registration. It was previously in Northern Ireland. It'd been used by Tony Blair. And I get this strange email back a couple of minutes later. And they said, we can't discuss anything with you about this car. And they've sent me a copy of the Official Secrets Act. So there are a number of things on this car which were specific to it, which apparently were covered by the Official Secrets Act. So, and I still don't know to this day what a number of them did. So I can't have some of the bits repaired in it because those are the Official Secrets Act parts. And it's got a few really, really special things in it I find out about. So apart from the armoured, so the armouring is about so thick. So it's about 2 inches thick throughout the entire car. So this is built just for bombs. There are a couple of top secret things on it. And there's a weird thing. So in the centre, on the roof, in an XJ8, it has a sunglasses holder, which sort of flips down. And inside there, instead of having a place where you put the sunglasses, it had 2 switches. It had a green one and a red one. And the red one was inside a plastic box. And you look at it and think, that's a bit James Bond. I wonder what that button does. So we were living in central London at that stage, and I thought one day, it was a Sunday, I'd just cleaned the car, and I thought, right, let's do this. Let's find out what this thing does. So there's a switch I have to put on first before the red button lights. So I'm thinking, I've got no idea what this red button does. Please don't be a bomb. Please don't be anything ridiculous on it. So I flick the switch, and it says armed. You think, armed. I wonder what that could be. Dare I do it? Go on. So you flip the thing, press the red button. Suddenly at that stage, the car fills up on the outside. Every part of the road fills up with foam. And it's a smoke and fire submission system to stop it from catching the whole car on fire. So the entire road fills up with foam about that deep outside the car right the way around. It was a fabulous thing. Weighed 2.7 tons. The discs on it were £4,500 each. I kept that car for probably about 8 months. We drove round in it. We drove down to Dorset in it repeatedly. Used it a lot. We took the kids out in it, just as a sort of standard car. It went wrong with the time because obviously it was so heavy. And eventually it had gone wrong on so many occasions. It snapped axles continually. You go around a corner and it snap an axle. And I think in that 8-month period, we snapped 3. So I thought that this probably isn't a good day car. So it went off to be sold. And we had a few people come and see it. And then it eventually sold. And some people turned up, and it now looks after the diplomats at the Somalian embassy. A couple of months later, that's been sold. And somebody emails me some cars that are going for sale. And I think, turns out it's 2 more Armoured Jaguars. So I called the guy up and he says, I've got 2 of them. They're £5,000 a throw. And I said, great, they're mine. I'll take them off. I'll see you this afternoon with cash. So we drive to Birmingham, up in the jewellery quarter. And we go and see the cars. The cars are exactly as I had seen them when they were in the warehouse before in MOD sales, when they'd been sold in the first instance. And those were in a lot better condition than my one. My one was a bit ropey. These ones were, pristine. We turn up and have a look at them. One of them's got some marks on it, which are really strange. And the other one's absolutely perfect. Great car. So you get chatting with the chap. So why on earth do you have 2 Armoured Jaguars? And he says, well, I'm a gold bullion dealer. And basically people bring gold bullion around the country to see us, and we use these cars and we ship £1 million a day in them. And so, in Birmingham we find that a lot of the armoured cars get knocked off. They know it's an armoured car that's coming past, they know it's coming out of your lockup, so there'll be guys sitting around waiting for them. They don't know this, they don't see these. That's because, it's an old Jaguar as far as they're concerned. So we put £1 million a day in these, and we take them from our place to the bank daily. And I've had enough. I've sold my business. The stress of it's got to me. I'm moving abroad, so it's all for sale. I say to him, so you've got a couple of marks on that one. Do you want to tell me there's a mark on the window there? Yeah, there is. There is a mark on that window. And he shows me the video of the car coming down the road in Birmingham, and it's on one of the off streets near the jewellery quarter, and it's a very, very thin street. And to the left of it, there's like a bollard, and there's a split between the bollards. And as he's coming down the street, he comes up like that, and a van cuts him off. And then another van comes from behind. So he's trapped in this car between the two of them. At that point, he reverses, bashes the van at the back, mounts the curb, goes right the way around, and they fire a shotgun repeatedly at the car. And the marks on the window are the bullet marks where it's been shot with a 12-bore repeatedly. And we're like, wow, war wound, fabulous, I'll take those two, please. So we have those for about another year, and eventually I sell them onwards to other people. Fabulous things though, to drive around London. Nobody knew what they were, really special. Each one of them was one of the heads of cabinet at the time, so I think we had Tony Blair's car, we had Gordon Brown's car, and I think we had Alistair Campbell's car. And eventually they all went off to interesting places. Selling them, that was an experience and a half. The people who turn up who might want to buy an armoured car off you, oh my God. You get a call at sort of 12:30, you look at the phone and think, oh my God, why is somebody calling me at 12:30? And you say, I'm abroad, but I'm coming back and I want that car. He would text me at night and ask me for my bank details. And you look at him and think, you want my bank details at 3 a.m. in the morning? Are you mad? You start thinking about it and thinking, what does this guy do for a living? Why is he abroad the whole time? What is he doing? So we're running the company, which is still in London. I'm taking the car back for work, and I say, right, I'll see you, but I'll see you in broad daylight with lots of people around, not knowing who it might be. So the chap rocks up. He says, yes, we are taking this back to Iraq. We're using this as an armoured personnel carrier. And so this car now shuttles people around war zones. The next one that was sold does J-turns. So that's used now up in Scotland by a company which is run by a number of guys from the SAS, where they do performance driving. And so basically an armoured car handles very, very differently to what a normal car would handle like, because it's probably 2 tons heavier. And so they're using this to actually train people to drive people out of difficult situations in armoured cars. If we come up to today, a couple of years ago I decided I had that itch again, and I wanted a period Ferrari. And I'd always wanted one. So I'd been out to look at one 4 or 5 times. It'd never been quite the right car, and I kept on looking at a number of red ones with Crema. And I wanted a 308. I'd always wanted a 308. From my youth, Magnum PI was fabulous. Obviously without the shirts, in my case. And I'd been out to see 4, 5, 6 of them. And then I saw one in a dark brown colour, in Marrone Dino Metallizzato. And I thought, that's my car. And so I started looking a couple of years ago, during lockdown, obviously. What are you going to do with your time? Probably buy a new car. So I started looking through ads over in Europe. And I spoke to a few friends, and I basically worked out 2 cars that might be the right one to go for. One had been around for ages. It had been in Sweden for probably about 25 years and had a little bit of rust. And I'd looked at the car, and it was beautiful. However, it was really rusty, and these things are like they're like Lanciers. They rust from the bottom upwards, and in 2 years' time there'll be nothing left if you go for one of those cars. So I thought, that one I'll probably leave. And I sent somebody out to go and see another one, which is in Italy. It had full Classiche. It had everything done on it, so new engine, new gearbox, new brakes, new interior. I got somebody out to go out there and see it, and they came back to me and said it was absolutely fabulous. So we booked the flight to Ryanair, straight over to Venice. I took my 15-year-old son. To wire money over to Italy is really complicated. It takes forever. So we arrive at 9 a.m. the next day to pick up the car. We're in the garage waiting, and the money's being transferred the whole time. We're thinking, it's got to happen. It's got to happen. Midday goes past, nothing. 1 o'clock goes past, I'm thinking the whole day's gone. The first day's the flight, the second day's the drive home. So at this stage I'm thinking, are we actually going to get back in time? 4 o'clock, the money turns up. He says, you can go. Did you bring some number plates? I mean, what do you mean, did you bring some number plates? How they been? And he says that on the Italian plates, only the person who owns the car can drive it. And if somebody else is caught driving it, they go to jail. Okay, well, it would have been helpful to know this before it arrived. Okay, so I'd already insured the car. The car's insured on the chassis. So he says, do you bring some English number plates? And I think, nope, no English number plates here. And he says, I've got some German ones at the back if you'd like it. I'm like, where am I driving? I'm doing Italy, then France, route Napoleon. No, I'm not going through Germany. Perfect. Put the German plates on the car. So the German plates get stuck on the car, and off we go. So we're driving through at night, and on the way back, we're coming back through Italy, and there's a large part of the road that goes through Italy, and it weaves and bobs right the way through the south coast and goes on to Monaco. And as we start coming towards that area, I start seeing a load of blue flashing lights. And we're coming up to a toll booth. And it must be 1 o'clock in the morning, and there is 14 squad cars sitting there, and a couple of police who are going like this. And I think, shit, I'm in a German number-plated car, it's an Italian car, and the insurance is in English. That should be an interesting conversation, particularly with the French police. And they look at the car, they take one look at the number plates, spot that it's German, and they go, on you go. And looking back, it's one of those stories of, what did I think they would do? What did I think they would do at that stage? It was a German car with a father and son at 1 o'clock in the morning on German plates. Will it be perfect? Of course it will be perfect. It is a German car. Everything on it will be absolutely as it should be. It is perfect. So they waved us through, and we drove on to get to the hotel, arriving at 2 o'clock in the morning on just off route Napoleon. So the next day we take it back, route Napoleon, back home. We make it back that day. And yeah, so now it's here in the flesh. I put 5,000 miles on it in the last year. Absolutely love it. And I'm using it as a sort of continuity, as a sort of continuation of my passion. One of the things I bought this for was to do trips in it. Things like going to Le Mans Classic. I take my kids each year. A lot of friends, etc., like to go to Le Mans Classic, and they like to go and stay in a top hotel. They'll go and stay in a chateau or something. And they say, do you want to come? And I'm like, no. What I actually want to do is I want to transfer my passion. I want to transfer my feeling about these inanimate objects to my kids. I want them to be involved. I want them to feel what I felt about it. You know, the touch, the smell, the feel, the excitement. So I would take this to Le Mans Classic over to the Nürburgring, and I would take my children with me each time, and I'll make them be part of it. So this becomes part of their world. I think that, you know, with the younger generation, a lot of them are feeling that these are like white goods. You know, it's basically a toaster. If you've ever been in a car like this, if you've ever been driven fast in something like this, the sound, the smell, the excitement, it's not a toaster. It's one of those things that you get out and you feel it. And, you know, that was partially what this was for, and it was partially what Targa's about as a company. It's, you know, to help us to share our passion with other people so that other people can be involved, so that other people can feel what we feel. So the beginnings of Targa is, I think that in every man's life you get to a stage where you get to choose again what you're going to do with the rest of your life. And we'd sold a property company in London, and I thought, I'm out, I'm done, I'm finished. And you look at your life ahead of you, and I think I spent the first 9 months at home, and you think, I can't get out of bed at 2 o'clock every day. And you think, I've got to do something. I can't just pick up the kids from school and do nothing. And after sort of 7, 8 months of boredom, I thought, I've got to do something. I want to think about what I'm going to do in my life. And I thought, I love my cars. I love people. What I really want to do is I want to share that. I want to do something that gives something back. I want to do something where I can be a part of it. I think, when I was a kid, grew up in Cornwall, I've been a cub, so I've been part of that club. I had then gone to a tennis club. I'd been to a golf club. And then when I moved to London, I was invited to gentlemen's clubs, and Soho Farmhouse, etc. And each one I went into, I was invited to, and I never joined. And I thought, I've never joined any of these clubs. And you look around and you think, where's my club? Where's the club for people like me? I mean, I've been to the Porsche club, the Ferrari club, and these weren't people like me. These were people who wanted rivet count. These were people who wore flat hats and were very dogmatic about the way that the club should be run. And I thought, these aren't my people. Where are my people? And I thought, actually, you know what? Nobody's done it. I don't have a club. I'm going to make a club for people like me. I'm going to make a club for people like me who don't want to be behind the tape all the time, that don't want to be on the other side of the barrier, who want to be part of the event. I think we've all been to lots of events. We've all been to a lot of events where there's a couple of men around tyre kicking, and they go up the car and they kick the tyre and they're with their mate and then they walk off again. They're never allowed behind the tape to go and see that car, to go into it. And so that's why I set up Targa, is to actually create something where we could be part of the event rather than watching it at a distance, so that the cars could be shared with other people. When you go to an event, you could go in the car. So what does perfect look like to us? If you could have anything, what would your dream be? And it was, my dream would be, I'd love to go out in a car that's driven by a Formula One driver, or to be taken out in a 700 brake horsepower monster, and maybe a champion to drive it. We thought, this is brilliant. I've got to do this. So the ball started rolling, and I got in touch with some friends. And I remember that our first meet, the first one we did, was in a car park. And I was speaking to a friend of mine, and he said, so what's your dream? And I thought, I know the answer to this question. He said, who would you want to come? And I thought, I thought you were talking about cars. And he said, who would your dream person be to come? And I was like, I don't know. Who's the coolest person you'd want to be stood next door to in a bar? Somebody you could go out for a drink with, somebody who's a total petrolhead. And I was like, I don't know, Dario Franchitti. Absolute legend in his own lunchtime. Won Indianapolis, absolute total petrolhead. It would be perfect if he turned up. So we're coming close to the date. I've got a number of people who are coming to the event, a number of whom I'd known for years, some of whom I'd met more recently. One of whom I'd met in a car park of a restaurant. It was Mike Flewitt, and so he came along to our first event, brought his Senna. His friend who had the C-Type also had a Senna, brought that. Another friend brought a 4.5 litre Bentley. Another friend brought an Aston Martin Zagato. And I thought that was it. So we had probably 20 cars there. And just at the last minute, we're about to go for a drive, and another car drives up in the car park, and it's a Daytona convertible. And I'm looking at it thinking, I've got no idea who this is. I don't know who this is. I don't recognise him at all. He's got a baseball hat on, gets out of the car, takes the baseball hat off. It's Dario Franchitti. And I thought, oh my God, our first event, I get 2 Sennas, an Aston Martin Zagato, and Dario Franchitti turns up. Oh my God, this is fabulous. And I've got the chief executive of McLaren there. Ball is rolling at that stage. I get a call a couple of days later from Mike at McLaren, who says, I like what you've done. Can I sponsor your next event? And I think, oh my God, do you want to sponsor my next event? Yeah, and we'd like to release the Elva at the event, our new hypercar. Would you mind if we released the Senna GTR, which you just have made? And I'm listening to it thinking, is this for real? Is this genuine? He said, no, it's genuine, it's real. Yeah, and we'd like to also release a 620R at that event. So I'm like, right, okay, so we've got to do something now. So we hire a Prescott, and the ball starts rolling on the concept as well of what we want to do as an event, to be part of the event, to go in other cars. I say to Mike, is there anybody you could bring with it? And he said, well, we've got a test driver. Okay, who's your test driver? Kenny Brack, Indianapolis 500 champion, the guy who has had the highest speed accident in history. So he's hit more Gs in the crash than anybody else ever. Yes, bring him. That would be fabulous. So we had Kenny Brack taking people up the hill climb at full pelt in a Senna GTR in an Elva and taking people out for rides. And we found it changed the nature of events for us. That basically, there were always a couple of friends together who'd be there kicking tyres and having a chat. And they wouldn't often mingle with other people. However, when we started having people go into the cars, they couldn't be with their friend anymore. They had to go out with somebody else. And what they did was they went out for a drive with Kenny in the Elva with the Speedster top on it, with no windscreen, sideways. They come out and go, "Oh my God, you can't believe what I've just been in. You have to go in that." And they'd say it to anybody who is standing there. Anybody who was standing there at the time. Their friend wasn't there. Their friend had gone off to do something else. However, they're standing there, and the person next door, they said to them. And it was interesting to note that the relationship was suddenly made. And you suddenly had a group of men who'd never met each other before, all standing around going, "Oh my God, this is amazing. You must go in it." And I thought, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do with the rest of my life. I want to create these moments. I want to create these experiences for people. I want to create these opportunities for people to get intimate and up close to these cars and be part of it. And also to share it with the younger generation, to share it with my children, because otherwise it dies with us. And to me, the most important thing you can do with these things is you can share them. There are lots of people, I've got friends who are collectors, they put 1,000 miles on a car, it sits in a shed for the rest of its life. That's not me. Without sharing them, they don't mean anything. They cease to have any meaning. Going into a car museum is possibly, in my experience, one of the driest experiences ever. You think it'll be really exciting. You go into there and you think, "Oh my God, there'll be an AC Cobra," and then you see it sitting there. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't give you that feeling. It doesn't touch you. When you stand next door to it and somebody revs it and the exhaust makes your whole body flutter. When you go out in a 700 brake horsepower space frame 4x4, going up a hill with ruts of a foot deep, and you're shaken within an inch of your life, and you get out of it, you can't help but feel something. And to me, that's what cars are all about. That's the bit you've got to share. That's the bit we've got to share. Is the bit that we've got to pass on to the next generation. You know, they're all looking at these as white goods, as Ubers. Why not just take an Uber instead? Why not just not learn to drive? Because of this. This is what creates the excitement. These are the bits that make you feel excited about being near a car. This is what makes me have the passion. It's what makes people like us think, wow, we've got to be involved in cars. And I suppose, for Targa, our mission is to share this. It's to share this with as many people as we humanly can. And to share it with guys like you, if you're interested. It's to share it with our children so that they can come along to events and feel part of it. And it doesn't matter whether it's your daughter, your son, whether you're, 14, 15, or your son's 40. It's that sort of connection that you both can have together where you can do events and share something in a relaxed environment with basically some new friends. Targa's a membership club. And the reason it's a membership club is to make sure that when you come to an event, you know who you're next to. That's why we get special cars to the events. That's why we get some of the people we get to come to these events, because they know it's a safe environment where they don't have to worry about bringing out their £5 million car. They don't have to worry about bringing out their car that they've inherited, that they've had their entirety of their lives. So what's coming up? Okay, so our next event is with you. So that's at Cadwell Park. It's called Tokyo Drift. What we like to do is to mix things up and to create events where you can be part of it, but also have a theme. So the theme for this one is Midnight Club and Drifting. So Midnight Club was illegal street racing in the 80s and 90s. So JDM cars, German cars from that era, used to go down the motorway at speeds over 200 miles an hour. And we've got a number of those sort of cars coming to the events. And you'll be able to go out in them with the owner. You'll be able to discuss them with the owner. On the drifting side of things, we've got a number of pro drifters coming along. People like Bagsy, who's Monster's main athlete, who's done things like the Gymkhana with Ken Block. He's coming along and will be drifting people in his 1,200 brake horsepower Nissan Skyline GTR. And for any of you mad enough, he'll take you out and he can drift for you. And we're going to do a drift battle that day where you can watch, or you could be actually in the car with him when it happens. You can also take your car onto track. It's an open pit lane, so these things will be put together throughout the day. And you'll also be able to go out in a number of the Midnight Club cars if you want to. And the sort of things we've had at events is we've had RS200s, original ones, which were driven by the man who designed the engine. We've had Peter Stevens at our events. We've had Harry Metcalf at our events from Harry's Garage. We've had Kenny Brack. We've had Dario Franchitti. We've had Le Mans racers like Mike Wilds, who I met years and years ago with that Ferrari F40. He's come to our events. He's actually taken out some of the people in their own cars. So they've brought along, I think a guy at a last event brought a Project 7 along and said, I'm not really sure I want to drive it on track. And what we did is we arranged for Mike Wilds, who's, I think he's 12 times Le Mans racer, to take him out around the track and show him what that car could do. And you should have seen the look on that man's face when he got out of the car. Real excitement. So you can come along to our events, and obviously we're doing this with JAYEMM on Cars as a taster. An opportunity to come to our event, see what happens, see if you like it, see if you liked it, John. See, are we your people? Then ongoing, we're doing 4 events a year at the moment. That's about to change. As I mentioned, we sold a company. From now on, these have been done, I suppose, probably 3 days a month. And if you look through our Instagram, you'll be able to see the sort of cars that have come. We had 25 Group B cars, Group A cars at our last event, including Colin McRae's cars were coming and people were able to go out in them. That's been done in probably 3 to 4 days a month. We're going full time into this now. We're investing in the business, so we're going to double the amount of events next year. And so the chance is now to get involved, to be part of it, to be part at the start.
And there we have it. If you've made it to the end, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to see what Targa's really about, there is only one way to do it: in person. Andy is a big fan of the channel, and he'd love to give back to the people that support me. So if you're thinking of coming, please drop him a line, the link will be in the description down below, and tell him you watched this interview. I'm always excited to see a new business that's passionate about cars, and hopefully now you can see why I believe that this one has that in spades. And I cannot wait to see what's next. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.